Heads up.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's press conference. Mia Rabson with the Canadian Press. I will be chairing today's event. We have Minister Chrystia Freeland with us. Before I begin, to prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, we remind all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from all microphones at all times. When you are not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. These measures are in place so that we can protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters, and conduct our business without interruption. The Minister has a short statement, I believe, emphasis on short, and then we will move to questions.
Okay, I was going to make some kind of a joke about how I'm always very short. I think there was a Flaherty line, right? He said, I'm always short and I'll try to be brief, which is the case. So, hi everyone, good afternoon. Let me start by congratulating President and President-elect Trump and his team on a truly historic election victory. I and the Prime Minister and our colleagues are looking forward to working together with them. The Canada-U.S. partnership is absolutely fundamental to the economies of both of our countries. And we have really effective experience working together with a number of U.S. administrations and with this specific team, and have really built some enduring relationships, I would even say friendships. So we're looking forward to continuing to work together for the prosperity and the security of people on both sides of our shared border. And I do want to say, because we live so close to the United States, I know a lot of Canadians were very absorbed in the U.S. election. I know there are a lot of Canadians who are feeling unsettled today. And I want to say to all Canadians that I am absolutely confident that Canada will be prosperous, that Canadians will be safe, and that our sovereignty, our sovereign identity will be secure as we work with this newly elected U.S. administration. Alors, je voudrais commencer par féliciter le président élu Trump et son équipe pour leur victoire. C'est vraiment une victoire historique. Et on a dû travailler en étroite collaboration avec cette équipe. Nous savons que les liens, la collaboration entre le Canada et les États-Unis est très important pour les Canadiens et pour les Américains. Nous savons que nous avons des relations gagnantes et on est absolument confiante qu'on va continuer avec ces relations gagnantes avec cette nouvelle administration élue par les Américains. Et je vais prendre un moment pour rassurer les Canadiens et Canadiennes. Je sais que beaucoup de Canadiens et Canadiennes ont suivi de très proche la campagne, les résultats hier soir et pendant la nuit aux États-Unis. Et je veux rassurer les Canadiens et Canadiennes qu'on a des bons liens avec cette équipe, qu'on a un plan. Et la chose la plus importante, que fondamentalement, les relations entre le Canada et les États-Unis sont gagnant-gagnant. surtout sur le plan économique. Et ces relations gagnant-gagnant sont une garantie absolument ferme qu'on continuera d'avoir des relations fructueuses pour nos deux pays. I do want to just take a moment also to comment on the Canadian economy. Inflation has been coming down. It was 1.6% in September, below the middle point of the Bank of Canada's target range. It has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for the past 9 months. It is now at a 3.5-year low. Interest rates have been coming down, and Canada has now been the first G7 country to lower rates the first time, the first G7 country to lower rates the second time, the first G7 country to lower rates the third time, and the first G7 country to lower rates the fourth time. This is real relief for Canadians, really, really important in people's lives. And at the same time, we have now seen wages in Canada outpace inflation for the past 20 months. My announcement today is talking about an issue that is so important for Canadians, which is our tax-free first home savings account. I think we all know that fairness for every generation is tremendously important, that a cornerstone, not just of our economy, but our society, is ensuring that young Canadians who want to own a home have access to that dream of home ownership, that the younger generation can buy a home if that's what they want to do, that owning your own home has been the center of prosperity for previous generations of Canadians, and also for a feeling of security and community. And it's really important for me that younger Canadians can do that too. That's why we set up the tax-free first home savings account. It has been, as you guys know, you can contribute $40,000 towards the purchase of your first home. It is tax-free in, it is tax-free out. And I am really happy to announce that we have now hit a milestone of nearly 1 million tax-free first home savings accounts opened in Canada. It's a big deal. And to me, it's important because it means young Canadians are taking the necessary steps to buy a first home. But to me, it also speaks about confidence in their future and in their future. You have to actually act to open your tax-free first home savings account. You have to put money in it, and nearly 1 million Canadians have done that. That to me says something really, really important about Canada and about younger generations. Et évidemment, en décembre, des autres mesures pour aider les jeunes, surtout pour aider les jeunes Canadiens en l'achat de première maison, entrant en vigueur l'amortisation du 30 ans. Et l'amortisation du 30 ans, c'est pour les premiers acheteurs et c'est pour ceux qui achètent une nouvelle maison. Et en plus, on a augmenté le niveau de valeur du maison qui peut avoir d'assurance à 1,5 million de dollars, pris ensemble aussi avec la direction du taux directeur, aussi avec le CELIAB. On est dans une situation où plus de Canadiens et Canadiennes, surtout la jeune génération, pourront acheter leur première maison, et dans lequel on encourage la construction de nouvelles maisons duquel on a besoin. Merci beaucoup et je suis prête à répondre à vos questions.
We'll start with Judy Trin, CTV.
Hello, Minister. Thank you for taking our questions. What is your government doing to ensure that Canada will be exempt from 10% tariffs? Are you taking, if we take Donald Trump at his word, it will be implemented? So what assurances do you have to Canadians that you can protect Canadian businesses from such a tariff?
I think that is a really important question. And I do take everything that President Trump says very seriously. I think we need to. That's why we have been very, very conscientious, very systematic about maintaining our relationship, maintaining our lines of communication with the Trump team. We had some very intensive times together. We had some tough moments, but at the end of it, working with President Trump and his team, we renegotiated our trade agreement with the United States, the fundamental governing deal of our trade with the U.S. The deal that we now have that governs our economic relationship with the United States is Donald Trump's deal. He signed it. He and his team negotiated it. He is proud of it, and I think he's right to be proud of it. The deal does something very new in trade deals, which is it focuses on guaranteeing a fair wage for workers. And that is something that Canada and the U.S. were able to do together because labor standards and environmental standards and wages are comparable in our two countries. That's why we were really able to negotiate a win-win agreement, one that Ambassador Lighthizer negotiated, that President Trump negotiated, and they are right to be proud of it. So that would be my first point. Well, 2 points, really, the relationship and the deal. The final thing that I'll say, which I think is really important, is President-elect Trump and his team have been very clear about their concerns when it comes to China. Their concerns about Chinese overcapacity, their concerns about the unfair competition that American workers are subject to when it comes to China because of the intentional policy of overcapacity, because it's just not a level playing field if American workers are competing with Chinese workers where the labor standards and environmental standards are entirely different. We share those concerns. And that's why it was very important for us to put in place last month a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs and a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum. That's something that Canada believes in doing, that we have done, and that means that our fundamental manufacturing industries are now fully aligned with our American partners.
As a follow-up, in the U.S., economic woes took front and center despite a growing economy. That's not what the electorate felt. You keep on insisting and saying to Canadians that inflation's going down, that our interest rates are going down, and that our economy's better. But if the message is not landing in the U.S., your polling here shows that it's not landing either. What are you going to do to turn that around?
Well, thank you for the question. And let me start by saying it's not me insisting about inflation and interest rates. These are facts. And the fact is that interest rates have come down faster and further in Canada than in the United States. That has been such a focus for me because I know what the pressure was of interest rates on Canadian households and Canadian businesses, particularly because of the structure of our mortgage market where people have 5-year mortgages in general. And the rates have come down. They've come down further than south of the border. That is real relief for Canadians. The same is true on inflation. Inflation has come down further and faster in Canada than in the United States. That also is real relief for Canadians. I have been really focused on it because inflation has hurt people, and it hasn't come down by itself. You know, Canada has run a much tighter fiscal policy than the United States. That has contributed to inflation coming down, which has made it possible for interest rates to come down. Our deficit has been, around 1.5, in the 1.5 range. They are running deficits of more than 6%. And we are seeing the results in a macroeconomic environment that is not as rough. Interest rates down, inflation down. I started there because I think that's what really matters to Canadians. Having said that, I used to be a pundit. I'm not. I am now an MP elected by Canadians, a minister here to serve Canadians. It's not my job to speculate on why Americans voted as they did. It is my job to wake up every morning and to work hard for Canadians. And I really do recognize that we've been through some tough times. Things are still tough for a lot of Canadians, and supporting Canadians, with really basic things right now, supporting Canadians with affordability and the cost of living, getting the economy growing more strongly. These are the things that are really important for people. These are the things we're really focused on here in Canada.
Mackenzie Gray, Global News.
Hi, Minister Freeland. Donald Trump has promised mass deportations. J.D. Vance has said it would be reasonable to expect that they could deport 1 million people a year. Is the federal government planning there will be a surge of migrants crossing from the U.S. into Canada?
Thanks for the question, Mackenzie. And again, what Americans choose to do, what America's incoming elected administration chooses to do in the United States is a decision for Americans and American leaders. The decision for Canadians and what's important for Canadians is to control our own border. And that is something that's really important. It's fundamental. And I do want to assure Canadians that we absolutely recognize the importance of border security and of controlling our own border, of controlling who comes into Canada and who doesn't, and we will do that.
The RCMP has said that folks in Quebec could see, with a Trump win, more people crossing. And just to ask again, is there a plan in place, or are you expecting that more people will be crossing from the U.S. to come to Canada to avoid being deported?
What I am expecting is that Canadians expect us to control our border. Canadians quite rightly believe that it needs to be a decision of Canada and Canadians who comes to our country and who doesn't. And that is something that we absolutely have a plan to ensure.
Ryan Tumblety, Toronto Star.
Yeah. So far this morning, from your colleagues, from you during this press conference on the subject of the Trump tariffs, you've emphasized the past relationship, you've emphasized the past trade deal, but these seem like a real threat to Canada's economy. He's talking about 10 to 20% tariffs. Presumably he was aware that the renegotiated NAFTA exists when he was talking about them. So I'm just wondering, is your government's plan just to rely on old relationships, or do you have something more aggressive in plan to make sure that the Canadian economy isn't hit with what would be crippling tariffs?
Great question, and we absolutely do have a plan. Having relationships is valuable, and we have old relationships, and we are building new relationships. And we absolutely have a plan to ensure that Canada not only is okay with this new U.S. administration, but that we absolutely thrive. And that plan is going to be built on three things. One, having the relationships. That is important. Two, the economic fundamentals. At the end of the day, the reason that we were successful in getting a win-win outcome in the NAFTA negotiations was because the Canada-U.S. economic relationship is beneficial to both parties. The fact is, Canada is different from the rest of the world when it comes to the U.S. We are the single biggest export market for the U.S., bigger than China, Japan, and the UK combined. That means that gives us leverage. That gives us some real power in that relationship. It is also the case that our relationship with the United States is uniquely mutually beneficial. We build things together, and Canadian workers do not undercut U.S. workers. We have similar labor and environmental standards, and we are both high-wage countries. These fundamentals are really, really important and are the basis of the good relationship we have in the past and of the good relationship that we will maintain and build into the future. And then the final thing is, we have a plan, and we are going to be executing on that plan. I want to give you guys one, I think, very powerful piece of evidence that there is just that the economic fundamentals are really in place today to ensure we have a win-win relationship with the economic relationship with the United States, and that we will have one in the future. And that proof point for me is the acquisition by Cleveland-Cliffs and Lorenzo Gonsalves of Stelco. Lorenzo Gonsalves is a leading American steel producer. I don't think he will mind my saying, he has been a long-standing supporter of President Trump. He chose to acquire a major Canadian steelmaker. Now, would he do that if he did not believe in the fundamentals of the economic relationship between our two countries? I don't think so.
And just following up, President Trump has also been quite insistent on the idea that NATO countries need to hit the 2% spending target on defense spending. Canada will not hit that target in 2032, which is the end of your current plan. You'll be higher, you'll be spending much more, but you won't hit it. I'm wondering if there is room in the fiscal framework for more defense spending and for more defense spending more quickly.
So let me just say, we have said we'll hit our target by 2032. The Prime Minister said that, and we will do that. I think it's also really important to underscore that when it comes to security as well, the Canada-U.S. relationship is unique. Canada and the United States share the world's longest unmilitarized border, and we have a shared responsibility for the security of our shared continent. Canada has been investing heavily in NORAD. That is a very trusted relationship, and that is an underpinning of Canada's security, but also the security of the United States. And, for me, another really important proof point of the mutual and mutually beneficial interdependence of Canada and the United States is what has been happening in critical minerals and metals. Both of our countries recognize that we need to make our supply chains more resilient. Both of our countries recognize that we need to reduce our dependency, particularly on China. And we've been working really hard together on critical minerals and metals. And to really highlight how important this is, not just to Canada, but to the United States, and how highly the United States values Canada's contribution when it comes to critical mineral and metals supply chains, not just to American economic security, but to national security. We have seen the Pentagon investing in and supporting directly critical minerals and metals projects in Canada. To me, that is a really strong sign of how closely we work together and how mutually beneficial our relationship is. We're dependent on each other. We support each other. That's what makes a win-win relationship in the economy, in national security.
Boris Prou, le devoir.
Bonjour, Madame la Vice-Première ministre. J'ai très bien compris que vous avez un plan pour éviter les tarifs qui a été promis par la campagne Trump. Mais j'aimerais savoir si jamais votre gouvernement ou un gouvernement futur n'arrivait pas à empêcher la situation. La Chambre de commerce du Canada a publié une analyse qui dit que ça pourrait coûter jusqu'à 1 100 $ par personne de part et d'autre de la frontière si ces tarifs sont appliqués. Est-ce que votre ministère confirme que ça pourrait être aussi cher que ça dans le pire des scénarios?
Merci pour la question, Boris. Et je ne veux pas minimiser l'importance des liens économiques entre le Canada et les États-Unis. Pour dire la vérité, je veux faire le contraire. Et je veux souligner l'importance des liens économiques entre le Canada et les États-Unis. Nous avons une dépendance mutuelle en ce qui concerne l'économie et c'est pourquoi c'était possible pour nous de conclure un accord de libre-échange gagnant-gagnant. Parce qu'on a des économies qui travaillent très, très bien ensemble. C'est la réalité. C'était la réalité il y a 4 ans et c'est la réalité aujourd'hui. Et pour moi, la réalité clé, c'est que c'est M. Trump lui-même qui a négocié avec l'ambassadeur Lighthizer l'accord de libre-échange qui gouverne nos liens économiques aujourd'hui. On a des relations économiques qui étaient vraiment créées par le président Trump et son équipe. Le président Trump lui-même pense que ce sont des relations gagnant-gagnant. Et je suis complètement d'accord avec lui, je suis complètement d'accord avec l'ambassadeur Lighthizer, qu'on a un bon accord, on a des liens qui sont gagnants pour le Canada et qui sont en même temps gagnants pour les États-Unis. Et c'est la réalité de cette dépendance mutuelle qui me donne la confiance qu'on trouvera une voie pour continuer d'avoir des relations économiques très proches et très bénéficielles pour le Canada et pour les États-Unis.
J'aimerais vous entendre sur l'Ukraine, un dossier que vous connaissez bien, et les propos de M. Trump sur l'Ukraine. Est-ce que ça devrait inquiéter les alliés de l'Ukraine de voir M. Trump retourner au pouvoir? Et est-ce que vous-même, vous voyez jouer un rôle plus grand dans ce consensus international pour l'Ukraine?
Merci pour la question. Et je vais parler avec le Premier ministre ukrainien plus tard aujourd'hui. Et je voudrais commencer à m'adresser directement aux Ukrainiennes en disant que le Canada est une alliée forte et loyale pour l'Ukraine. Nous comprenons l'importance de la guerre. Nous comprenons que c'est vraiment une guerre, la guerre dans le monde entre la démocratie et la dictature. Et on est là pour l'Ukraine aujourd'hui. On sera là pour l'Ukraine demain. Et on va continuer de travailler avec tous nos alliés pour aider l'Ukraine. Je veux aussi souligner l'importance d'un effort dans lequel le Canada a joué un rôle clé, dans lequel le Canada a eu du leadership. Et c'est l'action collective du Canada, des États-Unis, de la Japon et de l'Union européenne pour donner 50 milliards de dollars à l'Ukraine, utilisant les actifs souverains du Banque centrale de la Russie pour nous permettre de donner ces 50 milliards de dollars à l'Ukraine. Nous avons finalisé cette décision. Nous avons finalisé ce plan il y a 2 semaines à Washington pendant la réunion des ministres des Finances du G7. On était très intentionnel en négociant cet appui pour l'Ukraine. Et c'est l'appui important du 50 milliards de dollars. C'était nécessaire d'avoir une vraie collaboration entre les États-Unis, l'Union européenne, le Japon, le Royaume-Uni et le Canada. Et le Canada était vraiment une leader. C'est très important aujourd'hui plus que jamais que l'Ukraine a cet appui. Sure. So thank you for the question about Ukraine. I'm going to be speaking to the Ukrainian Prime Minister later today. And I do want to start by saying directly to our Ukrainian allies that we are here for Ukraine today. We're going to be here for Ukraine tomorrow. We are going to continue to work in close collaboration with all of Ukraine's allies to continue to support Ukraine. We recognize that the fight in Ukraine is a fight between democracy and dictatorship, and that the Ukrainians are fighting for us. Something really important that I want to mention in that context is the fact that at the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington a couple of weeks ago, on the sidelines of the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, the G7 finance ministers concluded a very important agreement for the support of Ukraine. This is something that our G7 leaders announced at their summit at the beginning of the summer. A really novel and creative and collaborative arrangement whereby using the assets, the frozen assets of the Russian Central Bank as security, we have come together to extend a $50 billion loan, a $50 billion sum of money to Ukraine. That is Canada, the U.S., the EU, Japan, and the U.K. working together. Canada is providing $5 billion of that sum, $5 billion Canadian. $50 billion is an important source of support for Ukraine, and the Ukrainians have that now. It was intentional that we wrapped that up a couple of weeks ago. I'm glad they have that support. And if you guys will permit me, look, I know that this is a day when many Canadians are feeling uncertain, they're feeling anxious, and it is important for me to reassure them. I think a lot of the brave people of Ukraine are feeling anxious, so I'd just like to say one sentence to them in Ukrainian, if that's okay. Я хочу сказати нашим друзям в Україні, що Канада стоїть з вами, ми стоїмо з вами сьогодні, будемо стояти з вами завтра. Ми розуміємо, що ця війна – це війна між демократією і диктатурою. Ми горді вас, ми вдячні вам і будемо далі вас підтримувати.
Brian Platt, Bloomberg.
Hi, Minister Freeland. You were talking about the importance of your relationships when it comes to the incoming Trump administration, second Trump administration. Of course, one of the key relationships will most likely be with Robert Lighthizer, who you know well from the first time around. Firstly, have you stayed in regular contact with Mr. Lighthizer? And secondly, how do you think he views Canada when it comes to tariff policy? And is he open to the kind of, does he view the interdependence the same way you do? And is he open to the kind of exemptions that Canada may need if he brings in tariffs?
I actually did speak with Ambassador Lighthizer a few times yesterday. And I have been in touch with him. I've stayed in touch with him. And he stayed in touch with me. I have a lot of respect for Ambassador Lighthizer, and he is more than capable of speaking for himself, so I'm not going to put words in his mouth. I will say that one of the things that I discussed with Ambassador Lighthizer over the summer was China. He has, long before it became fashionable, had some very clear views about Chinese overcapacity and the impact that it had on Western economies, particularly on manufacturing industries, and the impact that it was having on the middle class and middle class workers. So that is something I've discussed with him. And that's an area where Ambassador Lighthizer and I are very strongly in agreement.
You've also been careful so far to describe the USMCA as Donald Trump's deal, and you said something he should be proud of. He does have potentially a much different team coming in around him this time than what he had last time. It seems like he'll have fewer free traders coming into his administration, but we'll see. Do you view it as a certainty that the USMCA will be renegotiated during this coming term? And if so, do you feel that you need to prepare Canadians for that we're going to go through another round of negotiating a new trade deal?
Oh, Brian, I'm not going to make any predictions about decisions or actions any government in the world will take in the future. What I can talk about is where we are today, what the economic fundamentals are of the relationship between Canada and the United States, and the degree to which our government is absolutely prepared to continue to defend and also to advance the national economic interest. We knew this outcome was possible, and we're absolutely prepared for it.
Sorry. As unfortunately, the minister has to leave, so that wraps up questions for today.
Okay, thank you very much.